For the longest time, Apple has had a reputation for being different and super innovative. Apple is the largest company in the world for a reason, but as surprising as it might seem, Apple is in big trouble. As you know, on the 7th of September 2022, Brazil's Ministry of Justice issued an order halting the sale of all iPhone models that are higher than iPhone 12, unless Apple will change its policy and include chargers when selling. With that, Apple is facing what Steve Jobs always feared the most, and what he believed would destroy the company. Even in his interview in 1997, Steve Jobs mentioned that as soon as you notice that the product manufacturers are driven out by the marketing team, you can be sure that that's the beginning of the end. And that's exactly what's happening in Apple in 2022, and if we look from close to simple numbers, it is a complete catastrophe. Moreover, Eve Jobs, daughter of Steve, posted a meme on her Instagram where she compared iPhone 13 and iPhone 14, saying there's no difference, and what happened after Eve probably would never have thought would happen. Besides, Apple faces various other issues, including horrible stock performances, too high payment fees, unfair labor practices, harsh working conditions, problems with being too selective, and it's hard to believe, but there is more. This is a very interesting situation, so let's explain it. Apple Inc. revealed the latest iPhone 14, iPhone 14 Pro, a series of new Apple Watch designs, and uncovered the next-gen AirPods at its Far Out event on September 7th, 2022. A day later, Eve Jobs, daughter of the late founder and CEO of Apple Inc., Steve Jobs, posted a meme on her Instagram account regarding the announcement. The meme read, "Me upgrading from iPhone 13 to iPhone 14 after Apple's announcement today." It featured a man holding up a dress shirt that looked identical to the one he was already wearing. This is coming from the daughter of the man who founded the company, the largest electronics company by revenue in the whole world, and the 7th largest company overall. Eve probably didn't think a harmless social media banter would blow up the way that it did, or maybe she did anticipate it. Who knows for sure? The fact of the matter is that Jobs' daughter took a dig at the growing concern consumers have had with Apple. Interestingly enough, the late CEO of the company sat down for an interview back in 1997, where he predicted that the only way Apple would fail is if the product manufacturers were driven out by the marketing team. And that seems to be the case today. Expanding a little bit on Steve Jobs' interview, he recalled how the Xerox machine was revolutionary when it was first released. By 1997, however, people grew tired of the invention. Why? Because once the product manufacturers gave consumers what they wanted, the marketing team got into the business of creating a monopoly with the technology. Eventually, they were the ones bringing in more and more money, which meant they were the ones getting promoted. The product manufacturers were either driven out or walked out. The next time the machine made an innovative decision, it was hyped up to no end, but with very little usability at the consumer's end. But what has Apple been doing to counterbalance the decrease in sales? Has it lowered its prices? Made its phones more accessible? Focused more on product innovation? No. Apple has jacked up its prices to over 700% in the last 10 years. The chargers are now being sold separately, and the products, as Eve Jobs highlighted, are virtually similar. Speaking of the charger situation, did you know that Brazil has seriously been considering banning the iPhone in the country because selling chargers separately is in violation of its Consumer Protection Act? Yep, there's also been an instance where a man was awarded an undisclosed monetary sum after he complained that having to buy a charger separately was unfair to him as a consumer. The country has sued Apple twice for this. It lost the first time, and the second one is still ongoing. To the average consumer, the fact that they've decided to opt out from upgrading to iPhone 14 this year and switch to Samsung or Huawei might not seem like it'd make much of a dent in Apple's trillions. The fact is, shareholders tend to notice discrepancies in sales. So, for example, back in 2016, Apple had one of its worst years ever. This isn't to say that they didn't make millions in revenue, but that their sales were lower in 2016 than they were in 2015. Why was this significant? Because Apple hasn't had a drop in sales since the iPhone launched back in 2007. The company regained its momentum in 2017, but it looks like in the 2022-2023 fiscal year, the company might yield similar results. Now, executives at Apple have admitted to a few shortfalls in their company's standard mode of operations, namely its refusal to move away from what's been working well for them for so long. Think back to what Jobs said in 1997. That's exactly what's happening today. This might be best explained by an example. You know those smart flip phones that everyone's raging about nowadays? A flip phone is a relic of the past, and the latest design combines the nostalgia of the flip phone with the innovativeness of the modern smartphone. It's got people riled up and lining up to buy the latest phones from Samsung and Huawei. Has Apple introduced its own smart flip phone and effectively thrown its hat in the ring as well? No, they have not. Granted, the company did unveil a concept phone a year ago, but there hasn't been any mention of the phone since. We really thought the latest iPhone would be a smart flip phone, but it wasn't. It was just a jacked up iPhone 13. Let's say that Apple is at the forefront of the electronics movement, much like Elon Musk's Tesla is at the forefront of the electric vehicle movement. But you can only be at the forefront for so long. Other companies will catch up. Apple is working to reduce its dependence on lower margin hardware products and instead grow its services business, which has higher margins and a more predictable, recurring revenue stream. To do this, Apple has introduced many new services in recent years, including Apple Music, Apple TV Plus, Apple News Plus, and Apple Card. With these services, the goal today isn't to ensure that you purchase the newest and greatest iPhone, but rather to make sure that you're simply using an iPhone and engaging with these Apple services. Who would have guessed 5 years ago that Apple would effectively bake advertisements and offers into their software, prompting consumers to seek them out, and probably in the future, this upgrade window will continue to expand. Speaking of Apple's downfall, this exact pattern has been observed before too. We'll give you a minute to think back to other electronic brands that refused to innovate their technology in spite of the millions they were racking in and are now obsolete. Nokia and BlackBerry. In January 2022, BlackBerry stopped supporting its operating system and essentially killed its iconic device. Nokia, on the other hand, was absorbed by Microsoft in 2013. Back in the early 2000s, people weren't concerned about the latest iPhones or the latest Android tech. The industry was dominated by either Nokia or BlackBerry, and rightfully so. Their tech was well ahead of its time, it was seamless and effortless, and it earned the company a loyal consumer base. This was best evidenced by the fact that almost every leading tech mogul in the early 2000s owned a BlackBerry. Will Apple suffer the same fate as BlackBerry or Nokia? It's hard to say. Neither of the two companies, in spite of the fact that they were majorly successful, reached the same record-breaking sales as Apple. But at baseline, both companies refused to innovate to meet growing consumer demands. Apple might also be losing sales because of the large number of controversies the company has been embroiled in. These include accusations of anti-competitive behavior by effectively locking in vendors and thwarting small businesses, iOS user unfriendliness, payment fees, e-waste and environmental destruction, unfair labor practices, harsh working conditions, allegations of child labor, misleading warranty claims, tax evasion, copyright infringement, and government surveillance and censorship. One solution to these problems might be the latest potential partnership with Elon Musk. Elon stated that his company, SpaceX, held talks with Apple Inc. about the latter utilizing Starlink connectivity for new satellite features on the iPhone. Musk says conversations with Apple have been promising. The iPhone team is super smart, but it's unclear if talks are still happening. We've had some promising conversations with Apple about Starlink connectivity. iPhone team is super smart. That's it for today. Subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell.